Hello and welcome back to the Outdoor Minimalist podcast. I'm your host, Meg Carney, and I'm an outdoor and environmental writer and author of the book, Outdoor Minimalist, Waste Less Hiking, Camping, and Backpacking. Follow the link in the description to pre-order a copy of the book so you'll be the first to receive it on the release date of September 1st, 2022. The Outdoor Minimalist podcast has a goal to give listeners actionable ways to waste less hiking, camping, backpacking, and more during every step of their process. Your impact outdoors starts long before you hit the trail and goes beyond leave no trace ethics. You'll learn how to identify sustainable outdoor brands, how to ask hard questions regarding sustainability, and begin to shift and evolve your mindset to integrate minimalism into all of your outdoor pursuits. In episode 47 of the Outdoor Minimalist podcast, we get to talk about one of my favorite topics once again, dogs. I've covered a fair number of dog-related topics, including things like trail etiquette, hiking with small dogs, and even the impacts of the pet food industry. So in this episode, we discuss how other areas of the pet industry and pet parent consumption in general impacts the environment. To help give us some pointers on how to lessen the impacts of having a canine companion, I had the pleasure of chatting with Briahna Hendey, the creator of Boba the Sustainable Mutt. Briahna is an environmental social scientist who is passionate about bringing meaningful discussions of sustainable living to the dog community. Drawing upon her experience working in the domains of sustainability, well-being, and conservation education in a zoo setting, Briahna hopes to spread the message that a fulfilling life with dogs needn't compromise the environment. Before we get to the interview, I am so excited to finally say that the Outdoor Minimalist book will be hitting shelves in just 1 month. That means that the book release is still set for September 1st, 2022. And as a reminder, pre-orders are available, and this will ensure that you get a copy of the book as soon as they send them out to stores. You will not need to wait. Pre-orders are also so helpful in terms of marketing and book sales for authors. So if you haven't and you know for a fact that you want to check out my book, please pre-order a copy today. The link to pre-order is in the episode notes or can be found on theoutdoorminimalist.com. Adventuring plans on your calendar? Remember to grab your Lava Linens travel towel on your way out the door. Founded by a mother-daughter team, Lava Linens crafts durable, luxurious travel towels as a more sustainable and better performing alternative to microfiber and cotton towels. Powered by flax and hemp, they're designed to be by your side for years to come. Use the code Outdoor Minimalist for 15% off your next order. So welcome to the show, Briahna. I have been anticipating this episode for quite some time, and I'm really excited to hear some of your insights into this topic of having a companion animal. So before we get into that, I always start the show by having guests tell us a little bit more about your involvement in outdoor recreation and what some of your current favorite outdoor activities are.
Yeah, so thanks for having me. It's great to be here. I've been looking forward to this for a while too. So my background, I guess, in the outdoors, I grew up camping and hiking. So I think that kind of fostered a love for the outdoors and nature from a young age. And in college, I studied biology and psych, which kind of led me down the eventual career path that I decided to go down. So I'm broadly interested in the behavioral aspects of sustainability and conservation.
So what do you do as a career now? Are you integrated in the outdoor industry at all? Or are you working in psychology?
I actually just recently immigrated to Canada, so I'm on the job market, which is part of the reason why I kind of launched my dog's whole dog Instagram sustainability account, because I have some extra time on my hands, because immigration is a very long and complicated process. I'm originally from California and kind of moved around the States for a bit, but now I live in Montreal in Canada. I am looking for jobs, hopefully in the government, in some sort of environmental social scientist position. So more on like the behavioral aspects again of whether it be like fisheries management or city level, that type of thing.
What were you doing before you moved to Canada?
I was finishing my master's degree at Ohio State. So I was in environment and natural resources with an environmental social science specialization. So I was looking at sustainable lifestyles and specifically looking at psychological well-being and reduced meat consumption and kind of how that all ties together.
Wow, that is a really fascinating topic.
Yeah.
Is that something that you've always been interested in, or what kind of jump-started this interest in sustainability and sustainable living?
Long story short, like I said, I studied biology and psych in undergrad. So my interest in that specifically, or that led into sustainability, started with diets. I did a summer abroad course in Italy, and it was looking at longevity and aging and kind of like the Mediterranean lifestyle. And the diet, which is predominantly kind of pescatarian and almost vegan, not completely, but like if you're looking at it in general. So as I shifted my own diet to try to mirror that and lifestyle, so more walking and just kind of simplifying things, it kind of led me down the sustainability route too. And then I took a conservation psychology class, and that kind of just really, I guess, helped foster that interest, and did an internship with tribal governance for a tribe in Southern California. And that really just kind of like fed into it too. And just wanting to do that versus previously I've been looking at working in the health sciences, and I just found sustainability a much more rewarding career path for me personally.
So for a lot of sustainable living, from like just what I've heard from a lot of people and then in my own personal life, I feel like it is really kind of like that gradual integration like you were talking about.
Yeah,
But
sure.
since this episode, we are going to focus on living sustainably with our pets, I kind of want to shift the focus to Boba, which if you guys don't already, you should follow Boba the Sustainable Mutt on Instagram, because first, he's adorable. And second, there's a ton of great information on there that I'm sure you'll touch on some of it, but a lot of it is really interesting and relevant to anyone who is a pet owner. So just to talk about Boba a little bit, how long have you had him, and when did he become a part of your life?
We've had him for just over a year now. We started fostering him and then shortly adopted him after in April of 2021. So just a little backstory on him. He was a reservation dog from northern Manitoba. And I didn't realize this prior to moving to Canada, but there's a huge problem with overpopulations of dogs in the northern native communities in Canada, because there's no veterinary infrastructure or anything like that. So the dogs don't really get veterinary care, which entails them not getting fixed. And there's just a huge boom of dogs up there, but it's really rough conditions because you're really far north. So they only live to be like a year and a half old on average, if they even live to adulthood. So we got him at about 1 year of age, which is old for a dog from those communities, sadly. And he's been with us ever since then. He's just a joy to have.
Wow, yeah, I didn't know that. I've always kind of heard about res dogs here and there, but I didn't really like understand the reasoning behind it, but that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, it's a big problem, and it's really rough on the communities up there, to be honest. And it can be a hazard because they're just large, starving dogs a lot of the time, which can be hazardous. Not that the dogs are bad, it's just kind of a bad situation.
Have you had dogs in the past before Boba? Is this kind of your first pet?
I grew up with a lot of dogs, to be honest, and cats. But I guess he's my first proper adult dog. When I was living with my sister out in Colorado, I was kind of helping be the caretaker of her Australian cattle dog, which was a lot of fun. No, he's my first proper dog that is mine, which has been really fun to really, I guess, be mindful about how I'm raising him versus when you're a kid, you're kind of just there and there's a dog type of deal.
Yeah, I kind of realized that too as an adult. When I adopted a dog, I was like, this is much different than I remember as a kid.
Yeah.
And I feel like my views have changed a lot on having a companion animal.
Yeah, you just learn so much.
Yes. So I'm guessing before you had Boba, because you've had him for like a year and a half, this sustainable living was already a big part of your life. So how did you start to integrate that into pet ownership?
I think the first thing that I did with getting him was look for food. And I mean, having studied more sustainable diets for people, that was also a big interest for me to begin with. So I was just trying to find something more local with more sustainable proteins and whatnot, which with dogs, it's hard to do because you're balancing their nutritional needs because they do eat meat, they need meat. So just trying to balance that from the beginning. And then as we got more into things like gear and enrichment and everything else, it kind of just built up from there. And when I joined the Instagram community and started realizing how much people have, then that kind of just reinforced that I really wanted to be mindful about how I took care of him, basically.
Yeah, and personally with my dogs, I find like in any area of my life, the dog aspect I feel like is where I do kind of give myself a lot more leniency, or I do create a lot more waste. And I'm not sure why. I don't know if it's like a disconnect in my mind or something like that, but it has been really hard for me personally to really integrate that like minimalism and sustainability throughout their entire life with me.
Yeah, I think it's really common. And I've heard other people relate it to it's a similar issue when people become parents to like babies. Like it's the same thing. Like they'll have simplified the rest of their life and be generally sustainable. And then all of a sudden you're taking care of this baby or this dog and it kind of just goes out the window. But there's definitely still waste. And I mean, things like dog poop, that's waste you can't really avoid. So it's just trying to manage it in a lot of ways.
Do you think dog poop is one of the main areas of waste that you've noticed having boba, or are there other areas like the diet, toys, enrichment, those types of things? Where do you think the biggest contributor to waste is?
I try to be really mindful about enrichment. So I use a lot of things that we already have on hand that are going to be going to recycling or compost. So a lot of old cardboard boxes. I mean, we shop at Costco, so a lot of things come in boxes, which is great for enrichment. So using things like that or toilet paper rolls just to prevent putting new things into waste. I try to not buy treats for the most part that are in small plastic bags. It does happen. Or I'll try to get them in bulk so that it's at least a little bit better, and trying to get packages that are recyclable. Not that recycling is by any means great, but it's at least somehow helping, maybe. Or making his own treats, just trying to prevent it to begin with. Because again, just poop alone, he's 85 pounds. That's a lot of poop. It's a lot of poop bags.
I want to back up a second to the treats, because
Yeah.
the treats for me, we just added a third dog to our home at the end of December, and we've been doing a lot of training. And with our other dogs, we were always giving them treats and doing training anyway, but with him specifically, I felt like I was buying way more treats. And so I have started making treats. There are pet shops where I live that have bulk treats that are relatively small that I can buy, but like, what are other ways people can make training treats? Really, that's the main treat that I would buy in a plastic bag.
Yeah, I mean, I make a lot of Boba's treats. It takes a little bit of time, but I don't know, I find it fun. I also like baking, so feel free to not do this if you don't like baking. But I'll often bake his treats, and you can find tons of recipes online. If you're looking for meat-based treats, there's a lot that you can bake. Or I recently tried just going to the butcher, and you can get organ meats for very cheap, because most people don't eat them anymore, but they're really nutritious for dogs. So you can get a lot of liver or whatever other organ meats they have on hand, and you just bake it at low heat for a long time. And again, you can find all these recipes online. So it's really cheap. You're using meat that would otherwise probably go to trash, but is super nutritious. And there's no real packaging involved. So that's great. Or sweet potato treats, whatever it happens to be. I mean, you can cater it to what your dog's dietary needs and preferences are.
Yeah, the butcher thing, that is a really great idea, because liver treats or like organ treats are one of the main training treats that we use. So
yeah,
I love that.
They're like super high value too. Like Boba loves them because they're, I'm assuming, way tastier than the liver treats that you buy out of the bag and that are chalky, which we also have, but they're like soft and squishy and presumably more flavorful. And I was expecting to be grossed out by the smell of them baking, because in general, I don't eat meat, but it didn't smell bad. It actually smelled pretty decent, which was very surprising to me. So if you're afraid of that, it's not a huge concern.
That is something that it always grosses me out a little bit if I do cook their food, because I also don't eat meat. So I'll try it. I would be willing to try it and just see how it works.
It's not as bad as you think. Like, you don't have to cut it until it's done baking. So it's not overly gross. Like, I mean, it's organ meat, but it's really not that bad.
And just as a disclaimer, we aren't going to dive too much into the impacts of the pet industry and pet food, because if you go back to episode 40, that episode is specifically about the impacts of the pet industry and our dogs' diets. So if that's something that interests you, then go back and check that one out. But kind of moving on to a different topic area of waste in a dog's lives is all of the gear we buy. So I guess this would be like leashes, jackets, backpacks, like if we're gearing it towards like adventure dogs, any of those types of things that you can imagine. And for certain people, it would be more than others. So like if you live in a cold climate, maybe you need little dog boots, etc. So a lot of these products I've found are not very well made. Probably probably within the realm of fast fashion, a lot of greenwashing. And I think a lot of the things that you might say would also apply when we're shopping for ourselves. But what would be some things that pet owners can do to start to identify better gear for their dogs?
One thing that I look for is certifications from trusted third-party organizations, whether it's like OEKO-TEX certified or there's some B Corps or whatever it happens to be, like looking for somebody else to do the work, basically verifying that it's like a worthwhile product that was made sustainably and ethically. I think that's the easiest route to go. Other than that, looking for concrete sustainability metrics and supply chain transparency, just from a sustainability standpoint. From a practicality standpoint, I really like to just get a feel for the products and make sure that they're actually sturdy. I spend so much time reading reviews before I buy anything to make sure that it's actually going to hold up for the long term. And I really like to consider whether or not I can repair something. So like Boba's harness, one of the things that I really liked about it was that the company actively gives guides on how to repair their products. And they sell things like replacement buckles, and it's made from recycled materials, which again isn't the best. Like it'd be better if it just wasn't including plastic at all. But I found that to be really difficult in dog harnesses that are sturdy and good for hiking and for longevity and everything else. So it was kind of somehow striking a happy medium for me. But certifications, durability, looking for reviews, and looking for reviews from people with similar dogs to you to make sure that it's actually going to fit your dog's needs. And when in doubt, I always reach out to the company and just ask them. And if they're vague, I would just assume that it's not good practices necessarily that they're doing. Because in general, I feel like when companies are doing good work and making good products, they want to tell you everything about it.
So when you're doing research, do you spend the majority of the time kind of reading about it online, or do you also try to find a place that would carry it in store so you can see it in person?
Ideally, both. So I tend to do most of the research online beforehand. And I found Reddit to be really useful for that because you're not getting fake reviews, because there are so many fake reviews online that companies pay to just have put on there, especially if you're shopping on Amazon or something. Like so many of the reviews are fake. So just sorting through all of that and trying to get real reviews from people, or if you're on Instagram, talking to people who you know use the products. And then if it's in a store near you, actually going and trying it on for your dog or whatever, and making sure that it's actually going to work for you instead of buying it and returning it. Because most of the time when you buy and return something, it goes to landfill. So even if you're getting your money back, it's very far from sustainable.
Yeah, I think that is a good distinction, is to like put the time in ahead of time, because first of all, it is an inconvenience. And most people, that is kind of what they're viewing their return as versus what you're saying on the sustainability aspect. But I also am kind of aware that not everyone lives in an area that would have a pet store that would carry the types of things that maybe they're looking for at all times. So what would be maybe some brands you would recommend? And I know this will really be dependent on the type of dog and the type of activity and kind of their disposition and needs, but just like as a generalization.
I've been really happy with Herta's products. Like our harness and our leash and stuff are from there. And like I said, they're 100% recycled and they're very sturdy and they're made for hiking and outdoors activities in all elements. And I mean, Boba's like gone swimming for the past year in his harness and in snow and everything else in between. And it's held up great. I know Roughwear makes, I mean, this is probably the brand that most people are using. I don't know too much about their sustainability. I've kind of looked on their website before and it kind of seemed like a bit of greenwashing, to be honest. But it seemed like they were trying to make more steps towards like reducing material waste and whatnot. But Nonstop Dogwear, I think, makes good harnesses. I don't know how sustainable they are. The main harness company that I'd recommend is the one that I have because I feel comfortable recommending it.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I do think that In the pet industry, I've been starting to kind of see a shift towards a larger focus on sustainability, but I don't think it is quite as mainstream as maybe other industries.
There's a lot of greenwashing, especially, it's kind of a catch-22 because I love small businesses and I want to support them. And I think that's kind of where the heart of like a good, healthy economy is. But there is a lot of greenwashing in a lot of these smaller pet businesses. So just something to look out too. I mean, it's more sustainable in the sense that the scale of the product manufacturing is scaled down. So, I mean, that's a good point to check for sustainability. But in general, like just look for concrete information about what they're doing and where their supplies are coming from. And the beauty of a small company is you can normally just ask those questions to the person who's making the product and actually get a good idea of what's happening.
Yeah, that's true. And something that I've just been kind of thinking about as you're talking, and I think you maybe mentioned a little bit earlier, is the materials that the products are made from. I feel that in any textile realm that synthetics are kind of the dominant, and they also have a really bad impact on the environment. But have you seen any like better alternatives as far as gear goes for dogs, or are synthetics kind of the standard?
It feels like synthetics are the standard. I know of a few smaller businesses that are making pretty cool products out of hemp. I haven't tested them in an outdoor sense to know how they would handle heavy duty hiking and whatnot, because they do kind of look more like kind of the aesthetic bohemian vibe, if you will. But I feel like it's generally poly blends and whatnot. I guess hiking leashes, you could opt for the climbing rope leashes. Like those seem to be more and more popular from small businesses that are repurposing used climbing ropes. So at least then you're just preventing something from going to landfill and it's durable. But again, it's still plastic based. So it's kind of rough.
Yeah, it is difficult because there really aren't other options. Then, like you're saying, it's best to just look for durability, reusability, or repairability.
Yep. And I mean, if you can get something that's already recycled, it's somehow less of a negative impact on the environment. But I know that there's also a huge argument against just recycled polyester fabrics because it's still plastic based and microplastics problems and everything.
So many problems.
Yeah. And then also ethical problems with people who have to sort through all of it. And yeah, it's just a mess.
Yeah, I could do a whole episode probably on recycled synthetics.
Yeah.
But to kind of talk more about the mindset behind the consumer culture in the pet industry, I think it would be really interesting, especially since you have been putting a lot of focus into social media in your personal life and with Boba, to kind of talk about how influencers on any social media platform can kind of perpetuate the idea that we need a lot of things to make our dogs happy and for their mental health and for all of their health in general. So how does social media either really like help or hurt us as far as getting the right information and access for better practices for our pets?
So many points to that question. It's just social media can be great. Like I've learned so much off of dog Instagram, if you will. Like there's so many good trainers on there and so many useful bits of information. But yeah, you really have to mindfully sort through it. And something I have to constantly remind myself is that Instagram and TikTok and every other social media app, their entire business model is basically to just sell us stuff, because the way they're making money is through ad revenue. And influencer culture feeds right into that as very cheap advertisements for these companies, which extends whether from like the fast fashion domain for people or into dog Instagram. And what I find really interesting about dog Instagram is that a lot of the people behind these accounts, including myself, we don't necessarily have any interest in being the face of our own account. Like I would never try to be an influencer of any sort on my own personal account. But somehow that dynamic kind of shifts with dogs. And it's really fun to get free gear or treats or whatever happens to be for your dogs. But it's like taking that step back or reflect on like, do I really need this? Like, what is my return on my time investment? And I've heard influencer culture being compared to a pyramid scheme, which kind of makes sense if you think about it, because you're, as an influencer, as a dog influencer, you are promoting products, you have your code and you get money from whatever product you happen to be pushing, but you don't have to hold on to any of the stock. And the company is paying you pretty minimally most of the times. Like there are a few influencers in the dog community that make a ton of money off of the post, but they're definitely a very small minority. So just you're basically pushing products for a very minimal return on your time investment. And on the consumer end of that, if you're just a person who's scrolling through Instagram and seeing this, like it's really important to know, like, this is all sponsored content most of the time that's just trying to get you to buy things. So looking and being mindful about, is this sponsored or is this person actually just like mentioning this product because they really like it? And just trying to sort through that can really help, instead of just being like, oh, this is really cool, I should buy that too because they seem to like it. Like recognizing it's probably sponsored, a company is paying to make you buy that.
Yeah, one thing that I have kind of struggled with, because I also follow a lot of dog content on social media, and I do learn a lot, but I have a hard time also knowing like how reputable that person is, which maybe that sounds bad, but like what
No, I totally get it.
Yeah. Like what are their credentials in kind of communicating this and like how it helps the dog or why it's useful or why it would be sustainable. And I know a lot of like the content on there doesn't really relate to sustainability. It mostly just relates to the dog's life.
Yeah. And that's the thing. It's like, I mean, we all really love our dogs. No matter like what little like community of dog Instagram you're in, like everybody loves their dogs and we all want to do right by them and like give them a fulfilling life. So when you see something that seems to promote their quality of life, of course, there's going to be that, oh, maybe I should get this for my dog. And I mean, even actively trying to kind of challenge this model of like buying your dogs everything. I still catch myself doing that with Boba all the time. I'm like, oh, maybe Boba would like that. But it's like just not feeding into that immediate impulse of buying something and actually reflecting like, oh, well, like, can I meet this need in some other way? Or can I repurpose something? Like, does he even need this to begin with? Or is this me just wanting something that's cute?
Yeah, kind of going back to that general question of, is it really necessary? And like identifying your intention. I really like that.
Yeah. And like, I mean, it's fine too. Like, I don't want to just be a killjoy and be like, never buy something for your own pleasure or like enjoyment. But at the same time, it's like just reflecting on it. And yeah, you can like buy a harness that you also think is cute, but like you don't need to buy 5 of them. Like 1 or 2 is probably fine depending on what you're doing and your needs.
Yeah. Yeah. One area of like my life with my dogs that I have started to learn a lot more about in the last 2 years is enrichment. And I will say that social media has kind of shown me a lot of different ways that I can enrich a dog's life. And there's a lot of questions and things I think we can say about this. So maybe let's just kind of start with talking about what enrichment is and how it can help your dog and your relationship with your dog.
Yeah, so I absolutely love enrichment and I really swear by it when it comes to caring for Boba because he's pretty high energy. And I mean, he was like literally a wild dog for his first year of life. So trying to meet all of his needs is like pretty high up there. Otherwise, he kind of becomes a lot. But taking a step back, enrichment is really cool. And it's something I learned about when I was working in education at a zoo. And basically what it entails is providing an outlet for species appropriate behaviors for animals in human care. The main goal of it is to promote mental and physical well-being. So again, this can be species specific because different species have different needs. But if you look at like a dog, they're scavengers. So giving them outlets for scavenging or giving them mental stimulation that isn't frustrating. You also need to kind of gear it to your dog's own abilities or levels, not to say that they wouldn't go up. But yes, it's just to get the animal to do some sort of physical or mental thing that they might do in the wild or replicating that general behavior. So like, for example, when I worked in the zoo, big cat species, they really like musty scents. And so the keepers would get the most horrifying smelling perfumes and colognes, and they'd occasionally spray them around the enclosure. And the cats would just go crazy for it. They'd sniff all up on it and you would just see them getting really into it. So it can look very different depending on what species you're looking at. But one thing that's commonly used in a lot of different species, including dogs, is using things like cardboard. So you can take old toilet paper rolls and fill them with goodies, or make snuffle boxes where you have a bunch of things for them to kind of sort through and try to get the food inside of it. But again, it doesn't have to include food. You're just trying to mimic natural behaviors.
Yeah, and enrichment, I think, for dogs, like you said, enrichment looks a lot different. So even between like my 3 dogs, they all kind of have preferences even in the type of enrichment that they really enjoy. And my OG dog, Ash, he loves shredding things. So like you're saying, like there doesn't even need to be a treat in a box, but if I give him a box, he just loves shredding that box.
Oh yeah.
But on the other hand, he also really loves to shred any plushie toys. And I think that is true for a lot of pet parents. So I don't want to like detract from the enrichment talk, but as an aside, what would you say about the plushie toys? Because that is definitely an area that I struggle with.
Yeah, so we do have some. I try to minimize buying them and just like extend their life for as long as possible. So like yesterday, I was sewing up a few of his toys and like one of them is down. It's a little raccoon toy. It's down to 2 legs and it's missing its ears and its tail too. But I just try to sew them up. I love sewing for whether it's like clothes mending or I don't know. I feel like I'm always sewing, to be honest, especially with Boba. But I try to sew them to keep them in some sort of shape for as long as possible so we can get as much use out of them instead of just giving it to him and him destroying it in 15 minutes and then it going to trash. And to begin with, when I'm buying them, looking for either natural fibers or, again, not the best, but recycled fibers if I can. And yeah, just trying to get as much use of it out of it as I can. And once it's like really dead and past the point of repair, I've started keeping all of those little bits and putting them in old threadbare socks that would otherwise also go to trash and just knotting it. And Boba loves those toys too. I think his socks are some of his favorite toys right now. So just trying to repurpose it for as long as possible because they do like to destroy them. They don't last forever, but if I can at least get it to last for as long as possible, then it's minimizing waste overall.
Yeah, I really like that sock idea. I have this giant box in one of our closets that is just filled with like fluff from the inside of toys that Ash has destroyed. So I'm going to try that because I mean, he just likes destroying things and I want him to be able to do that. So
yeah, I'll take like the fluff or if there's like a crinkly tail or something and like the squeakers and I just throw it in there and works pretty well. And like, he really loves it. He's just like flinging the socks around our apartment all the time.
That's so wonderful. Okay. So other enrichment things, you have touched on a lot of really good ideas, but going kind of back to the consumer culture of the pet industry and all of that, enrichment, I think for like our generation as pet owners has kind of really blown up and there's a lot of really great options now that I don't think were always available. But if you are a fan of dog talk like me, then every person that I follow on there, or I think the majority of them, they have a ridiculous amount of things. Like
giant collections.
Yeah, like 7 slow feeder bowls and like 20 lick mats. I'm exaggerating, but like,
but sometimes you're not exaggerating. It's like really these like crazy amount of numbers of like the same thing, basically.
Yeah. So, I mean, I get the point of like buying multiple ones to see which one your dog likes the most, you know, to kind of try them out. And one way that I have kind of started to get around that is a friend of mine, she has a lot of enrichment things for her dog. So I'll kind of try them with my dog. And if they really, really love it, then I'll buy it for them. But that's really the only way that I have kind of gotten around having to buy
I think that's the best way.
Yeah. But what would you say about that enrichment closet?
Yeah. So, I mean, I have my own mini ones, so I won't say that I don't use them and enjoy them. But again, it's just in moderation. So like for me, they were absolutely critical for getting through this winter with Boba because like when it's -30 outside, like I'll go on walks with him and like try to meet his needs that way. But like I can also only be outside when it's that cold for so long, as much as he loves it. But you don't need like 20 different feeders or even 10. Like you can definitely provide enrichment without just a huge assortment of Kongs or topples or whatever it happens to be. So using things like old towels to wrap up your food or wrap their food up in or boxes or whatever it happens to be. Like if you just think of the behavior that you're actually trying to achieve with these bowls or feeders or whatever happens, what you're offering the dog, like there's generally other ways that you can do it. It could be like cupcake tin or whatever it happens to be that you can put the food in. You're achieving the same end goal as you would with a slow feeder. Like it slows them down. It's fun, different textures for them, but you don't have to buy something new. Like there's so many things in our house that you can easily repurpose into some sort of enrichment item. and it'd still be good for general use, but you can occasionally repurpose it to just keep some variety into their enrichment rotation, if you will.
Yeah, I like those enrichment ideas with the towel and then the muffin tin.
Mm-hmm.
But on the topic of enrichment, as far as domesticated dogs go, what would be like the primary areas that people should focus on? I guess behavior areas.
I mean,
that's what I mean.
Just given how scent oriented they are, I think doing scent work is honestly still pretty underrated. Like one of the things that I was doing a lot with Boba this winter when we couldn't go outside as much was just doing little scavenger hunts around our apartment. And I would just hide his food around our apartment and let him sniff it out. And I mean, that doesn't take anything. You could just, I mean, depending on your preference, you could put it in little bowls around your apartment, or just if you're good with kibble on the floor, throw it on the floor. But really like working with their sense of smell. And Boba, much like your dog, loves to shred. And I think that's just like replicating the shredding part of like dissecting an animal for their predatory sequence. But just like looking at those needs and trying to meet them in different ways, you can do it without buying a lot of different things.
Yeah, and some of it, I think, for me, has been really trial and error, especially with the different dogs and their personalities in our house, seeing which ones they prefer and which ones they just could care less about. And if you are just repurposing things in your home, it does make it easier to kind of like narrow those things down faster.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm really a big fan of finding used pet toys on Marketplace, like Facebook Marketplace or Craigslist, or if you're in Canada, KGG. There are so many options on there, and a lot of the time they are lightly used, and you can get like 3 Kongs for like $10 or whatever it happens to be, or like puzzle toys that somebody got for their dog and they didn't like it and might have a bit of chew marks on it, but it's still completely functional, and you could get it for a fraction of the price and you're not buying anything new. So if you're looking to try different things, I think buying used, if you don't have a friend that you can swap with, is also a really good option to go for.
Yeah, I'm really glad that you brought that up with the online marketplaces, but I've also had some luck at thrift stores. I think it maybe depends on the community that you live in, but a lot of people in the area that we live, there are a lot of pet owners. So a lot of stuff does end up at the thrift store, and that's a good place to check.
Get so many good things at the thrift store. And I think it's Destination Trained on Instagram. She has a whole, I think it was a live that she saved, but it was on using thrift store items as enrichment. So not all of them were for dogs specifically, but just like repurposing things that you could find in a thrift store and just being a little creative and using it for dog enrichment. And it was really cool, to be honest.
What was her handle?
At Destination Trained. I think there might be a period in between.
Oh, okay. Awesome. Yeah, I'll check that out, and then I'll share a link to that in the episode note if anyone wants to look at that later. But kind of as we're wrapping things up, I want to do a little bit of an aside about enrichment that is, I guess, related to training and your dog's relationship with you as a companion. So in what ways can providing those natural outlets for your dog like strengthen your relationship?
I think you just get to have fun with your dog. I have so much fun even just watching Boba like shred something apart, but I think he really enjoys it too, because it just gets back to, I think, positive reinforcement training in general, but like you're providing something that is fun for them and that does meet their needs. And a lot of the times you can do it together. Like if I'm doing a scavenger hunt of sorts around our apartment with Boba, or like if I'm doing a kibble toss on grass, like I can help him. Like if he's having a hard time finding something, like before he gets to the point of frustration, I can kind of help guide him. And I think it really helps to reinstill that sense of trust between us and just developing pretty clear communication with your dog in a fun way that also encourages their own curiosity and their willingness to explore with you. And it's just really fun.
Yeah, with the newer dog that we have, I think it has really helped to kind of like build his confidence in new settings and stuff like that, which I think is really cool to watch. And one last thing about enrichment that I think you could potentially clarify. And one thing, when I first adopted Ash, he would destroy a lot of things that I wouldn't want him to destroy. And I think a misconception for me, because growing up, none of our family dogs were like allowed to destroy toys. They weren't allowed to like rip anything up. I assumed that like if I let him destroy something, he would want to destroy things all of the time. And I think that a lot of people still think that.
Yeah, I think that's a really popular misconception. And it's also one that I grew up with our dogs. instead of like realizing, I mean, it's just, you have to learn it. I didn't know it either, but like it is a species specific need. Like dogs like to shred things, dogs like to dig, and I mean, everything else that dogs like to do. But you kind of have to provide an outlet for that. Otherwise, the need is still there. They're just going to find a different way of fulfilling that need. So like I always joke with Boba because like he loves to destroy things, and he is a big high energy dog that, again, was wild, but he hasn't destroyed anything in our apartment. I think the first week we got him, he nibbled a bit of my shoelaces, but it was fine. I just like trimmed the edges. But because I was able to give him stuff to destroy to begin with that he knew he was completely allowed to destroy, it kind of prevented him from destroying anything else because he was meeting that need. And he's very clear when he wants something. Like at this point, he just like kind of looks at where we have our little cardboard stash and will bark at me if he wants to destroy something. And I just give it to him. Then he's able to kind of get that out of his system, if you will, and we're good. And I much prefer cleaning up some torn up cardboard versus like a torn up couch or something.
100%. Yeah, I learned it the really, really hard way. But I am now happy because he does have those outlets. So thank you for all of the information that you've already shared. And you already shared one really good resource that I will put in the show notes. But what would be some other resources that you recommend for people listening?
I mean, if you're into sustainable living in general, just using the resources that you might already be tuned into and applying it to your life with dogs. I mean, there's so many resources out there with sustainability. I started Boba's Instagram because I couldn't really find any specifically relating to dogs and sustainability. Since getting more into this, I guess, niche, if you will, I found some more, including your own podcasts and whatnot that kind of talk about it. But I think just realizing that it's not just a very specific subject, like the same principles apply. And I mean, there's just tons of resources.
Your Instagram was really the only one that I found that was really, really specific to dogs and sustainability, which is why I initially reached out. And I think it's great that you're kind of filling that need.
It's funny because like so many people own dogs, like so many people have cats or dogs or whatever, companion animals. And I don't know why there's a disconnect there in the sustainability community. Like I'll occasionally see, I follow a ton of sustainability pages, like both on Boba's profile and mainly on my personal one, to be honest. But it's very rarely talked about, like the crossover with dogs, which is just wild to me, just given their impacts on the environment, whether it's like through food or their gear or whatever else. And getting into it, like I can't even find metrics for what the environmental impacts are of dog gear or dog toys. Like you can see the size of the industry and kind of extrapolate what that means in environmental impacts, but like there's not enough research on it. Like there's just not enough sources to really like cite off the top of my head, to be honest. So I'm trying to fill the gap, but again, I'm like one unpaid person. So
yeah. No, that's something that I really noticed. There is a chapter in the Outdoor Minimalist book that is all about pet problems in the outdoors as well as just in general life. And when I was writing that and researching it, I didn't find any. I couldn't find any specific things according to the amount of waste that is produced in the pet industry beyond fecal matter.
Yeah, it's like dog poop bags. That's basically what's researched. And a bit related to like protein impacts. But it's like, I think one study that comes to mind. There's just a dearth of research there. There's not enough. So hopefully there will be more in coming years.
Yeah. If anyone listening is a pet researcher, please research this area and let us know. But with that, how can people learn more about you and your journey with Boba?
Well, you can find me and Boba on Instagram at boba.the.sustainable.mutt. And then I also occasionally write articles and do sustainability-related dog posts for Tales of Connection. So they're at talesofconnection.com if you want to read those articles, or you can find the post at Tales of Connection on Instagram, and it's just Tales as in a dog tail of connection.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And I'll share all of those links in the episode notes. But thank you so much for taking the time. I had a great time chatting, and I will continue to follow Boba because he has so many things to share.
Thank you so much for having me, and I am happy to share Boba's cuteness and other sustainability things with everyone. It's really just an excuse to post pictures of my dog, but that's okay.
That's totally okay. Everyone loves a picture of a dog. Thanks for listening, and if you like what you hear, let me know. Leave a review and be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. You can still find me on Instagram at outdoor.minimalist.book. for daily updates, other educational resources, and to help build an outdoor community with a shared goal to create a better outdoor space as we recreate.